the lack of consistent policy framework and inconsistent media coverage means that the attention that the individual cases garner have been left to the discretion of social media activism in order to gain popularity and public uproar. However, such cases unfortunately lack momentum as the hype around these individuals and cases die down with no concrete measures taken to ensure the due course of law. As a result of which, the issue has also become class-centric, as the majority of reported cases go unheard due to lack of social media outreach, and women from more rural settings become mere nameless statistics. Then comes the culture of victim blaming that is not only embedded within our social structure, but also within our legal systems. It thus becomes necessary to address the serious institutional and societal failures that enable gender-based violence and go beyond #justice. Before we begin, I'd like to outline some housekeeping rules. Speakers are requested to keep their microphones off when they're not speaking to ensure good audio quality for everyone. You're also encouraged to switch on your cameras, especially when you're speaking if your network connection allows you to do so. The seminar will be recorded and the video will be posted online. You're welcome to revisit the discussion later and feel free to share it among your network. We also invite questions from our audience and colleagues at the end or as the session goes on. Please feel free to write them in the chat box or the Q&A box on the right-hand side. Please have the chat box open in the window as well, or you can indicate which speaker you want to speak to by mentioning their name in the comment as well to help time within the discussion. If you want to speak, please click the raise hand tab on the right side of the chat window. The session will also be telecasted live on STPI's Facebook page. For those watching us on Facebook Live, please write your questions in the chat or comment section there, and they will be conveyed to the speakers through our team. With that being said, I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. Firstly, our first speaker for today will be Dr. Abid Suleri to give his opening remarks. Dr. Abid Suleri has been heading the Sustainable Development Policy Institute since 2007. He is the member of several different policymaking forums and advisory boards, including the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Our second speaker today will be Ms. Zoya Rehman. She is a special projects manager at Media Matters for Democracy. She is a feminist researcher and organizer based in Islamabad, who has been writing and working on gender and legal issues from a multidisciplinary approach through her practice and research. Zoya is also a recipient of the Chevening Scholarship Award and holds a master's in gender studies and law from SOAS University. Our third speaker for today is Inspector General Motorway Police, Dr. Sayed Kaleem Imam, who is one of the most decorated professional police officers, having served in high-profile appointments nationally and internationally. He holds a PhD in politics and international relations with an LLM in human rights law from the UK and a master's in philosophy. He has to his credit national and international publications and is a regular speaker at various training institutes and public forums. He has also been conferred with 3 UN Peace Medals, Qaid-e-Azam Police Medals, and President Police Medals for his distinguished services. He's currently serving as Inspector General, National Highway and Motorway Police. And finally, we have Ms. Havar Mumtaz, who will be chairing today's webinar. She has spent more than 30 years working in the field of development, environment, and women's issues. She's contributed to developing Pakistan's national conservation strategy and represents West Asia on the International Union for Conservation of Nature Council. Her expertise lies in the women's political movement, gender and development, and the women and environment empowerment. Her work spans capacity building of grassroots organizations to advocacy with policymakers. She uses her research interest of gaining insights into women's grassroots levels to make inputs in policy formulation. Ms. Mumtaz holds a master's in international relations from the University of Karachi in Pakistan. She is also the recipient of the Civil Award Sitare-e-Imtiaz for promoting women's rights. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. With that being said, I'd like to now call upon Dr. Abid for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Maruf. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good evening, depending from where you have logged in and watching the live stream of this very important discussion, where we are trying to actually unfold the femicide as well as the violence against women and justice. And the reason STPI is actually quite forthcoming in having this discussion, a learning discussion, is to actually challenge the taboo and stigma and all the unheard, unwanted sort of activism on social media, which starts with either declaring the victim as a domestic issue, that it's a domestic issue and no one should interfere in it, or ends at victim character assassination instead of questioning the murderer, and instead of questioning the accusers, it all boils down to the victim or a survivor. Now, when we talk of Sustainable Development Goals, leaving no one behind, and especially when we talk of SDG 5, gender equality and gender equity, it actually binds all societies and it binds all nation states to bridge the gap between the gender, on the basis of gender, to bridge the gap on the basis of men, women, or transgender, and to not only protect life and a respectable dignity in society, the means to livelihood, and of course the in all sphere of life, keeping women at par with men, and bridging that gap which either culture or society or the societal norms or religious norms they either reinforce or they impose on us. And that is to me is what SDG 5. And in a society, even starting like the society in the United States, where every day at least 3 women they get murdered by their intimate partners. So femicide is, one can say, has been accepted in all societies, in all cultures, and in all religions. According to the cultural norms and the societal norms, perhaps their interpretation that varies, and their acceptability, the basis of acceptability, that varies. The things they become more problematic when the justice system also starts getting affected by these societal justifications of femicides and of violence against women. And I think that's what needs to be changed. If we want, if we really want no one behind, and if we really want to achieve sustainable development goals, then we need to break these stigmas, we need to break these taboos, we need to break this silence, and we need to foster and work for a society which doesn't start the character assassination and stigmatization of victims or survivors of violence against women, but which questions the accusers, and which also addresses the root causes of acceptability of this violence in household, in society, in cities, in countries, and in culture. We have 3 distinguished panelists with us, as Maruk has already introduced them, and I look forward to hear from them. Whatever recommendations would emerge from today's webinar, we'll be formally sending them to the relevant authorities, concerned ministries, and to the media. And I would also urge the participants, and Maruk, as we will be conducting that towards the end, we need to observe a few minutes silence in memory of Noor Muqaddam, which has yet again challenged the inertia, the state of inertia in which we live in, where if any such gruesome thing happen, most of us, we start giving statements, we do our activism, but I feel that many of these things are not sustainable. In order to address these things on a sustainable basis, we need to address them at our behavioral level, at our judicial level, and we need to have a society in which everyone is safe. Every girl, child, every woman, every transgender is safe, and there is no coercion, there is no fear. So with these opening remarks, I'll hand back today's proceedings tomorrow. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abid, for highlighting the importance of today's discussion and linking it to the Sustainable Development Goals so effectively. I'd now like to go to our second speaker, Ms. Zoya Rehman. So the question I wanted to ask you, as your expertise is in digital rights, is Pakistan's online spaces have become very critical to the women's rights movement, especially in highlighting cases of femicide. We saw that with hashtag Kurtalan, hashtag Saima, hashtag Noor. Naseem Bibi, etc. And we've seen social media take charge of this almost more than traditional media sources. In your expert opinion, what impact has this had on online activism for how cases have been handled, and what more can be done to safeguard and expand this space to make it more inclusive for those women who are in the digital space?
Thank you so much, Maruk. Can you hear me? So I feel that one thing that's really evident when you look at online spaces in Pakistan, especially during these past few weeks, is that women at the moment, as of now, are extremely angry. They're angry about the fact that they're just not being listened to. They're angry about the rising femicide in Pakistan. And this is something that they have been warning people around them about for quite a few years now. And if we look at the past, I wouldn't say decade, but maybe 5 to 6 years, we can see that like Pakistan has had some watershed moments as well, right? Like we have public protests in the form of Aurat March. We have the Me Too movement. And women have constantly been talking about their own personal experiences in regards to abuse and violence. But at the same time, you also see, as you rightly pointed out, this rising backlash, because I guess these call outs or these sort of declarations of like personal declarations have really sort of shook the nation. And I think it's just high time that people start listening to women instead of, partaking in basically like a negative role to undermine them further. I mean, we saw that with the Aurat marches this year, the previous year, there's always a huge disinformation campaign that takes place right after these marches happen. This year, in fact, like there was so much disinformation that it actually led to actual perceivable risks for women in the form of potential blasphemy cases, just because women were out on the streets talking about the violence that they experienced, talking about reclaiming public spaces. Like that is such a personal affront to so many people in Pakistan. Like it's just shocking that these naysayers are refusing to believe women at all. Another thing I think that women are trying to point out right now, and this has happened in online spaces as well, is how there's this culture created not just by sort of conservative like socio-cultural norms, but also by the government and the legal system of basically disbelieving victims and of trivializing the dehumanization that they experience, whenever they experience abuse or violence or harassment, etc. Why don't these women go to courts? Like, why is that not something that they even consider initially, when they have like a harrowing experience to share, or they want justice, like whatever they think justice is. So I think that all of like everything that women at the moment, and I don't just mean like cisgender women, obviously I mean trans women as well, because obviously there are a lot of cases that are brushed under the carpet as well. Like there are a lot of, we know of Noor Muqaddam because it was such a harrowing, gruesome, brutal case, but at the same time, there's so many women in brutal case, but at the same time, suffering we just don't know of because they don't come from the kind of socioeconomic background that perhaps Noor did. And similarly, there's so many trans women, who have been brutally murdered these past 4 to 5 months, but we don't know their names, So, this femicide is, I think, bigger than what we currently perceive it to be, what we currently see it as. And apart from that, I think that what women are saying right now, like all of this represents a clarion call for change. And I think that we really need to, and I do feel that Noor's murder and the murders of Bushra and Kurutulain, they have had a sobering effect on society as well, whereby at least some people who initially, would just like refuse or reject whatever women would say are perhaps now listening or perhaps self-reflecting. I hope so, at least that's, something that's happening. But I think that the anger that women feel right now is palpable. The grief that they feel over what's happening in the country, how they're constantly unsafe, more unsafe, in fact, like by the day, is just something that, the government and also our society at large like need to take seriously. And I don't think these issues would be taken seriously if, for instance, like a federal law on domestic violence is going to be, at the behest of the Council of Islamic Ideology, which is apparently supposed to have an advisory role only. But I don't know why we only hear about the Council of Islamic Ideology every time there's like domestic violence legislation, like on the horizon. So we really need to sort of stop belittling women and their concerns and their experiences and the real threats of violence that they experience on a daily basis in Pakistan at the national level and in society as well. I think that we need to listen to women that when they bring forward their own sort of like notions of justice. And I don't think that that's a huge ask either, So I think that we do see these sort of opposing sides on social media, but at the same time, one great thing I think that social media has done is bring a lot of concerns that women and basically experiences that women were experiencing in the private sphere, like it's brought them out in the public. And I think that these conversations are extremely important, and we need to listen carefully to what is being said right now in order to consider like real substantive change as far as gender-based violence is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zoya. I particularly am grateful that you talked about the issue of backlash and the issue of needing legal enforcement as well to safeguard women's rights, and for the government to take a step and say that no, this is where we firmly stand on this issue and we will not let this continue. With that, I'd like to move on to our third speaker, Inspector General Motorway Police, Dr. Kaleem Imam. Given the cases that we have seen, again, that have been highlighted through hashtags, through viral videos, through online activism, given the cases of whether or not it was the motorway gang rape or bus harassment, what concrete measures, whether that be sensitivity trainings for phone operatives or officers, have the motorway police taken to prevent such incidents from happening again without the need for a viral video or public uproar or to bring them to light? And what more can be done in this field?
So thank you, Madam. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon to all the distinguished speakers, and also Assalamu alaikum to all who are listening to this program. Thank you very much for inviting me, Dr. Abid Suleri and all the team. It's a very important topic, and I'm glad we're discussing about it. The more we highlight, the more we discuss, the more is there a possibility of making all those stakeholders realize that this is an ailment which is existing in society, and it's time we take substantive measures to actually overcome. Let me just briefly add before I answer you the motorway question. Do remember, we all need to understand who Homo sapien is basically, and the violence is somewhat embedded in this Homo sapien or this human being that that the history of which we know is recorded back to almost 15,000 years. He has been a cannibalist also, he's been eating people, and then he loves killing people, It is so strange, that he will spend billions of money and resources just to create some perks for survival and welfare and prosperity. And he would simultaneously spend billions, just to come up with something to destroy mankind in one go, like nuclear device, So there's a strange paradox and strange eccentric behavior that is embedded in this humans. As a police officer, it's very painful for me where I've been serving in Sindh and Punjab and other places, Every morning we read a crime diary, and it's so distressing to hear that almost 4 to 5 or 6 kids, mostly boys, are sodomized, And the cases of women are hardly reported, especially in the context of sexual and gender-based violence. They are only reported once they are either injured or they actually get killed in the process. I very vividly remember, a sobbing father told me that how could he narrate what has happened to his daughter, He said, who will marry her when she grows up? The stigma and talking about this unmentionable crime, this is how the society is, and this is what their values are basically. But if you talk about motorway incident, or whenever you talk about femicide, or whenever you talk about violence against women, we must almost first of all, discuss the reasons behind why this is happening, And if we can actually reduce and work upon those reasons, there's all the possibility that you will overcome or reduce or bridle what's happening. The alarming part or the non-serious part, which I take as a police officer, is hardly anything is done to actually overcome the reasons and to work on the reasons and the causes and the factors as a result of which this heinous crime takes place, For example, why does this crime takes place, It's all because of normal crime which is taking place, like because of poverty, unemployment, inflation, socioeconomic issues, When you go to child abuse, primarily it is a disease, a perversion, a lusty criminal mindset owing to the genetics or upbringing. And when you're talking about violence against women, you're mainly talking about the attitude and the way a person has been reared or nurtured, living with the perception of superiority, complexes, inhibitions, and tactile misogyny and misunderstood ideologies. So these are some of the reasons, are we focusing? When we actually started talking about how to deal with the suicider and how to handle the acts of terrorism, we came up with the National Internal Security Policy, 2014 to 18, and now we have from 18 to 2023. We have commissions which have been formed, and I was in one of the meetings where they came up with the National Action Plan also. So you need a lot of those soft intervention. You need a lot of those processes where you enhance literacy, enhance education, come up with the development programs, social actions plans, welfare programs. You need to do a lot of things before to stop him before he actually does it. Now, when he does it, that's where this the element of response comes, So we need good forensics. We need people who stay committed. We know we need people who actually can understand how really to deal with the victim and how actually to go after the perpetrator. A lot of laws have been made in this context. If you go through, you can see that this is not just an issue of Pakistan, but all over. Like Dr. Abid has mentioned, every third woman, goes through some sort of a violence all over the world. So it's not just a Pakistani issue, it's all over the world. The only point of concern is, where do we stand? What measures have been taken by the other countries to actually reduce them, and what measures have we taken? So if you go through it, it's a sad structure, We are ranked 153 out of 156 countries, in the World Economic Forum of the Global Gender Index, So which means that a lot needs to be done. And we need to take numerous steps in that context, And if you go through, you'll see so many things have been mentioned in United Nations Charter, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, and so many. Some pro-women laws have also been taken place, and almost, which I've recalled, 10 of them. Since 2004, almost 10 pro-women laws have been made. Look at the Pakistan Penal Code, 1860, almost 18 sections are trying to address this violence, femicide. Look at the Constitution of Pakistan. Almost 7 sections clearly are coming in aid, and giving guidance to the institutions like us, the police, the prosecution, the criminal justice system, to actually work on that. When we talk about motorways, the incident is condemnable. It's very sad. What happened that day was very disturbing for all of us, But do remember, it was a jurisdiction of the Punjab police right after the link road. And what happened over there is something we'll keep on talking. But when this incident was taking, and my heart goes out for whatever has happened, do we actually see that how many other such incidents were taking place at the same time? We are talking about 4 cases over here, which came to our notice, which we read in the newspapers, or where they were gruesome. But actually, look at the amount of rapes which takes place in the society, amount of this child abuse which takes place, the kalokari, and all those crime which is taking place. When you talk about what law enforcement should be doing, first of all, they have taken numerous steps, but a lot has still to be done. But firstly, the reasons, the factors, that is the most important thing. The secondly, what is expected of law enforcement agencies is response. They have come up with the Women and Protection Child Centers. They have come up with numerous such sort of desks at the police stations. There is a lot of community policing which is going on in the context, and which is bringing some results, but a lot has to be done. We need to look for certainty in disposal of cases rather than severity. Everybody, whoever commits this crime, must go through this agony of being penalized and being punished. So if you just go through what happened in certain of the cases, Madhu, you see what happened in Mukhtara Mai case. They were all acquitted in the end. You look at what happened to Ghazala Javed cases. It ended in compromise. Look at what happened in Kandeen Baloch case. It became a case of a family honor. Look at what happened to Khatija Siddiqui, the recent case that again we are talking about. He says technical remissions, So that is what reality is. But for law enforcement agencies and for people, whenever they come to know of this crime, they need to make a post-incident analysis. They make sure what lessons have been learned, how it can be prevented in future. They need to have a dedicated units. We need a combined team of male and female officers who can actually come and respond in the said case. In the motorway case, the culprit was arrested. He's behind the bar. He has also been convicted. He's going through the appeal process. But there are incidents which are taking place. So the issue and the point is, are we addressing them? My biggest concern is that, are we addressing the factors, You see, we need to, the doctors and the disease, look at this understanding, the diseases are not being caused by the doctors, they're only merely treating it. The fire brigade is responding to the fire. So we need to understand how can we get over this virus and bacteria. And it can only be done through the numerous steps, which has also been mentioned in the comprehensive response plan of the National Internal Security Policy, how violent extremism could be stopped, how this violence nature of a human can be curtailed or stopped or overcome. So, but we have a long way to go. There have been cases where it has been detected, people have been arrested, people have been punished, they're undergoing punishment. But at the same time, right now that we are discussing, there might be some incidents which is already going on. So we need to expand, we need to see the overall sphere, and we need to be accessible, we need to be transparent, we need to make sure that we are there when somebody is actually responding it. Lastly, this understanding of crime is very interesting. The understanding of crime is whoever goes through, which you have also mentioned in your intro, who's actually the complainant in this case, will go all out to ensure that the culprit and his entire family gets involved or get penalized in the process. Whereas the respondent or the culprit, he will make sure through his entire clan to ensure that he gets an acquittal. So, but the two clans and the two tribes and the two families should understand this is a crime. All my friends, many of them are lawyers. I always tell them, whenever such cases come to the courts, make sure that the person who has actually done it, should go through certain reprimand. He should not go scot-free. But we should not get him acquitted on the basis of some facts or some laws or some linkages. If we lawyers or we as a policeman come to know that he has actually committed a crime, we should put up maximum evidence, collaborative evidence, circumstantial evidence, use all forensics to ensure that he is pinned down and actually he goes through that punishment. Thank you, Baruch.
Thank you so much, sir. If you will allow, I do have a follow-up question, just because I'm very happy that you brought up the response team and their responsibility in these cases, because while laws do exist, of course, there is this societal impact, and we do need to address like the main problem, which is our social norms. But at the same time, understanding that, for example, there was this case that came out, I believe in 2019, where a woman was being harassed on a bus, and when she called the motorway police, the officer refused to speak to her because she was a woman traveling alone and asked to speak to a male companion. So realizing that we do have these social norms, realizing we do have these problems, and realizing that police and law enforcement are the first respondents, is there any like form of training or sensitivity or measures that we could take to counter the social biases within the people who are charged with protecting women?
Are you talking about
if you could in any way elaborate on that?
I couldn't get the last part. Are you mentioning about the recent case where one Miss Alina tweeted that she was going on school and with the school bus, and one of the operator of the motorway police wanted a male member to speak to the lady? Are you referring to that case?
Yes, I'm referring to that
case. Okay. Now, what? What happened that day? Actually, we are not trying to justify any of our wrongdoings. First of all, we apologized. We said something has happened and we should have been more responsive. This is the first thing we did. I think the best thing in life and the best way forward in any situation is, if you know that something wrong has happened or there's an omission on it, there's no harm in accepting it. We accepted it. We talked to Alina, we apologized, we even called her to our office, and we also asked her to relate this human story to our operators. You know, we got hold of 40 operators from the helpline 130, and Alina was so kind. She's a professor of English in government college, and she actually talked to them. Mere reprimanding their officers was not the answers, which we did to an extent. The actual was how to address it, and we accepted what happened. We could have responded promptly, but actually the mobile did reach her within 15 minutes. The local mobile did reach, but her grievances were absolutely correct that the 130 response should also have been so prompt. And why he was asking for a male member to speak to him, he was probably understanding that driver frequently travels and they might be knowing the exact location. I think that was what it was in his background, but still it's not acceptable. And the response should have been better, you know, in that way. So for that, we are building capacity. For that, we are trying to ensure that let's go for the location-based services, which we do have at certain places, but we are going for more. We have a Humsafar app, and we also have a Mashwara app where we get so many people who are talking to us. The motorway police is handling almost about 120, 150,000 people every day through Twitter, through social media, through the calls that we receive at 130. So we have a lot of success stories, but this was regrettable, and we accepted it. You know, we said let's do it in a better way in future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Imam, for highlighting what measures the police can take to kind of build sensitivity within. And I'm really glad that you mentioned how social media is also playing a role even in this, within apps, within Twitter. Finally, unfortunately, Parliamentary Secretary of Law Malika Bukhari was unable to join us today for today's session because an urgent matter came up for which she needed to travel. And therefore, I'd like to call our last speaker and who's chairing the session today, Ms. Khabar Mumtaz, to give her closing remarks.
Thank you, and assalamu alaikum to all the panelists and to and thanks to SDPI for organizing this. I think this is very timely and needed, and we really need to reflect on why things happen the way they do in Pakistan, and especially how women get and children also get the wrong end of the stick. And recent cases, there seem to be a spate. Maybe it's because they're reported more, but the point is that there seems to be a rise in almost extreme kind of violence that we are seeing. And we are also seeing at the same time a lot of concern for it, and the social media brings to notice all the nuances in such situations, both ways. I mean, social media can also be detrimental, but in creating awareness and bringing attention, they've been very successful. We were talking about what I find, I think everybody's spoken extremely well and given us, dimensions of this phenomena, and also the need to go to the roots of it. Why do people behave the way they do? And I think that is a big challenge, because the way people behave don't doesn't change overnight. It is a process, and it has to be nurtured, and it has to be directed. And I think that is what we really need to do. But I was just thinking about, this, what we call intentional murder. I'm trying to, there's a whole range of harassment and abuse and slapping and corporal, actions against women and children. But I thought that I would like to talk about the extreme ones, the murder, for the time being, and I think it reflects on everything. First of all, according to the UN statistics, about 50,000 intimate partner deaths take place every year around the world, and Asia is tops the list of those kind of extreme cases, and it sort of works out to 137 killings per day, which is a high rate of killing. Recently, as you know, women activists have been extremely disturbed by the phenomena of extreme actions and violence against women and against transgenders also, which is equally the whole situation applies to both kinds of people. In Pakistan, Hyderabad, we find, is where women activists and the police have come to a very good understanding of reporting and reaction and round the clock accessibility of the police station to activists for complaining and a quick response. So we find that very soon, once an FIR is registered, arrests take place, which is an interesting phenomenon. Then we, of course, go to the next part, which is the more difficult justice part of it. And we don't always see justice as one perceives as justice because of a number of other factors. A lot of those are procedural and institutional. Women's Action Forum, Sindh, collected information from May to July about just the murders that they became aware of and the ones that they took. There were in that period about 28 murders of women. And I think what is important for us to know, we've been talking about violence against women and murders against women and the law that there's a compoundability clause to the law where often they get away with murder. But what is interesting, all our policies and all our thinking is geared towards families as protectors and home being the safe space for women. And of these 28 murders, all were by immediate family members. Husbands, fathers, brothers, father-in-law, brother-in-law, all 28 murders were by them. And I think that is what I think we need to take note of, that women's safety is not necessarily within the family. Of course, there are many instances where family is protective, but when we see these extreme cases, we find that is one of the misperceptions that we have. That is one of the stereotypes or the myths that we have to explore, that how home and domestic sphere is not necessarily the safest for women when there are tensions within the household. And if 28 murders of women in 3 months were from immediate family members, I think we have a major issue to be concerned with. The other thing is that we do have a number of laws. But we have sometimes too many overlapping laws. For instance, the anti-rape law of 2016 was a fairly good law. It could have done with amendments in defining the nature of rape and the crime itself. But now what's a new ordinance, which has now just been approved by the Parliament, actually comes into conflict. We don't know which law will prevail. So I think just making laws for the sake of making laws is not really very helpful. I think more helpful is to see how do we make the implementation of those laws more effective, and I think that's where we need to focus. And while we have to work parallel, one is how do we address the reason, which is power relationships between men and women in our society, where women's rights are not always fully recognized, nor is there space for them to express their rights or to exercise them. So, I think two things have to go simultaneously: laws that are implemented effectively and other measures which show that women are respected and are given dignity. For instance, we have a domestic violence law being debated in the assembly, and people are not willing to see that a woman can be violated in the house, and therefore, and that a husband does not necessarily have the right to beat up his wife. The law is then passed on to the Council of Islamic Ideology, which means that people are not still willing to think of wives, women, daughters, sisters as equal citizens of this country and equals within a household, equal respect for each one. So, and these are indicators of how deep that thinking still is, and we need to address it. But to shelve it by sending it to the Council of Islamic Ideology, which will send it back with a number of objections, and the law which has been sitting in this has been going in and out of the assemblies since 2012 or 2011. It's been years since that law has not been passed in the national parliament. Yes, Sindh has passed it. Yes, Balochistan has passed it. Yes, Punjab also has a law which is on domestic violence. Again, how exactly it is being implemented is another matter. But at the federal level, we have been unable to. So I think that's the reflection of the reasons why things don't take place. And then, as you mentioned, that how a woman's complaint is dismissed, even at the household level. If she complains that so-and-so has been abusive to me, the first reaction is that she's misunderstood it. It's not meant to be. So, you know, which stifles the voice of a girl or a woman. Half the time they don't report, and half the time then families don't report. So I think what we need to really, I really want to go to see what can be the solutions to this. How can we address it? I think first of all, we have to rethink our approach of addressing it, knowing who is often the criminal in such cases. The criminal is within the household. So how do we make sure that households are secure and safe for women? And recently I did a whole exercise across the provinces on COVID. And what came out was that women need social networks, social support network. And those social support networks are where they, you know, the go-to person for a woman in a neighborhood. Who does she turn to? Who can she safely go to? Maybe it's a women's protection cell that can be that hub for her to turn to, for her to access easily, because she needs support where she is, not at the federal level, not at the provincial ministry level, but immediately where she is. So we need to have systems built into our services where a woman knows this is my go-to person or persons in my community. And I think we have to work at it, whether it's the local government system or the police system. I think women protection cells or crisis points where they can call in 24/7 is a very important, thing that can be done. The other thing is, of course, the implementation. How many medical legal officers are accessible to a remote village, woman who's killed or has been, violated, raped? Are there MLOs available? Is there enough facility available? Again, how many forensic labs do we have? We all recognize DNA is now recognized, but how many laboratories and facilities do we have where this can be done? Now, these are structural things that can take place and can be made effective and would go a long way in addressing these issues. I think Imam Saab will know, of course, that forensics cost money. Is there enough resource allocated at the Thana level to get them done? I know of families of a victim having to raise funds to get the forensic done, and often good, efficient officers give money out of their pockets to get the forensic done. Now that's not how it should be. Systems have to work, systems have to be resourced, and they should be easily available. For instance, there is a system at the Ministry of Human Rights where you can access legal aid, but getting those 10,000 or 15,000 makes you go through about 10 hoops that nobody will actually access that money. How can they access it? A poor woman, how does she get to it? So I think we have to, 2-3 things we have to do. I agree entirely with Imam Saab that we need to go to the core reason why there's so much misogyny in this country. But at the same time, and that is a long-term issue, which means we have to have books that instill that, that understanding and respect and equality of citizens. We have to have people who represent us in our assemblies who can see the women's perspective in every issue. They don't. Actually, they don't. There's so much misogyny sitting in our representatives themselves. Similarly, there are officers who are very, very alert and very efficient and very tuned in, but there are, juniors who are not. And therefore, I think a big positive thing has been induction of female police officers, because that has made a difference. And we have seen they have the capacity, and if they've given the space to take on responsibility, they do. So I think some of these are very structural things, that systems that can be put in. And then finally, I would also like to say that the data, we don't have enough information. Till recently, we talked about murders, but we never tried to look at who is the perpetrator. Now, I would suggest, in the absence of a proper system, there used to be a system when before devolution, the gender crime cell would get information of violations from the thanas there. But after the devolution, those systems, those channels of communications became irregular or uneven. So I think we need to rebuild those. And the provinces should be able to send that information, because there is an institution which should be made to deliver and to perform. We have so many institutions which if they're functioning fully, can actually facilitate justice, access to justice, and support, including the National Commission on the Status of Women. I mean, my term ended almost 2 years ago, and we've had nobody there. And under-resourced in material terms and also in human terms. The kind of blockages that it has to function independently, autonomously, and with the requisite staff and people, because its objective is not to fight other departments. Its objective is to find out where the gaps are, to be able to help and advise and fill in those gaps. It's not a rival. It is an institution that is supposed to help the larger good of things. So I think there are good examples. For instance, the Sindh Commission has just come up with a directory of violence against women support institutions and people within that province, from phone numbers to addresses, to Twitter hashtags, whatever. So I think those are things that should go. If we seriously build in support systems at the local level, everybody should have it. It's in Urdu and English, and it's probably coming out in Sindhi also. Those are the kind of things we need everywhere, where we can facilitate access, we can provide support when it's needed immediately. It has to be immediate. And thirdly, we make sure that the criminal is arrested. And then now we have to also look at how the evidence is generated, as Imam Saab has just told us, that evidence has to be collected properly. We recently were seeing in courts where they're saying the evidence is not full. It's weak. It's not collected professionally enough. So I think, the capacity building is one, prosecution, and on the other hand, not delayed justice. It has to be justice which is within normal times, and not each case taking 10 years or 5 years. So things are doable. We have a system. It has to be sharpened up. We have to create support system. All these are doables. And I think that's what we have to do. The laws have overlaps. I think those overlaps have to go, because, the new rape law has given so much authority to the deputy commissioner to be the head of or the commissioner to be head of the crisis cell. Now, how can he be an administrator and also be the policing responsibility? Policing responsibilities should be with the police only. So, I mean, there are many contradictions and conflicts in the laws also. I think we have to be working at multiple levels and across sections. We can't be working in silos anymore. So I think that's, we have to, there are successful initiatives, and I think the social media and activists have played a very big role. I see the model in Hyderabad where the activists are in direct contact with the police and are accepted and are also accessible to ordinary people in villages. They have developed a channel of communication, and I think those are the kind of channels we need across provinces and across areas. So I think there is hope. There are many things that can be done, but there has to be a commitment for all this. And the commitment, state has responsibility, it just cannot abdicate that. So with that, I'll close here. Maybe there are questions and answers.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was very helpful. I particularly appreciate that you brought up the matter of representation, because that is so important, as you also pointed out, who has prepared some questions for our panel.
Thank you, Maruk.
After this.
Thank you, Maruk. So as Dr. Imam quoted a few incidents, and Ms. Khaber also indicated toward them, often in cases of femicide, it is the family committing the crimes and are thus acquitted, or even if it is from someone outside the family of the victim is pressurized to acquit the perpetrator. When a crime is committed against a woman, it is actually a crime against the state, a state subject. Shouldn't the state be a party or the complainant instead of the families in such cases? That's my first question. And secondly, when we see cases like Shah Hussain or others where the government has, or the institutions, the police department, they have collected the evidence and given the evidence to the judiciary, and they are working on the case, but then they are acquitted or the sentence is not enough. This one is for Zoya, that these cases, they increase the significance of judicial sensitization than that of the government. And as Ma'am Khaber said, that laws for the sake of laws aren't helping us. So like, we expect the parliament to do their job, we expect the government to do their job, we expect the police to do their job, but when it comes to the judiciary is not doing their job, or not as efficiently as we would expect them to do it. So shouldn't the direction of our activism be towards the judiciary now? Thank you. I'm done.
Zoya, I believe that question was towards you, but anyone from the panel, if you want to raise your hands and answer that, you're welcome to do so.
I think Zoya's answer was, she was on mute, we didn't hear her.
Oh, sorry, Zoya, could you please unmute yourself?
Yes, I just did. Thank you for pointing that out. So yes, I should just ask a couple of questions. Number one, as far as domestic violence being the state's responsibility is concerned, again, that depends on whether the law is criminal or civil. For instance, I think in Punjab, the law is not of a criminal nature. And obviously, when you commit a crime, then it is considered to be a crime against the state. And I think that was also one of the criticisms that was pointed out at the time when people were deliberating on the domestic law legislation in Punjab, because the law was considered to be toothless and in contradiction to the tireless work of many feminists and women rights activists at the time, because what they had proposed was a lot more robust compared to what actually transpired. And like the bill that eventually became an act was basically only looking at civil remedies. As far as judicial sensitization is concerned, yes, there is definitely a discrepancy between the decisions of lower courts as opposed to some decisions of the high courts. I wouldn't say all, but at the same time, the thing is that, see, the law ultimately is going to be, I think that what I'm trying to say is that there needs to be a general overhaul as far as the judiciary is concerned. We currently don't have a single female Supreme Court judge. The law is interpreted in patriarchal ways primarily because it's mostly interpreted by men. And I don't mean to say that we don't have good progressive judges, but they're very few and far between. So I think that more than judicial sensitization, what is really needed is I think a complete sort of recalibration of what the judiciary in Pakistan is. And I think that obviously if you and there are a lot of really competent female lawyers, and there you do come across like some good female judges also, like in the Lahore High Court, for instance. So if you have more women again as a part of your judiciary, I do feel that that would really sort of change the perspective of the judiciary on cases involving gender-based violence. So I do think that both these problems, however, go hand in hand, because if you see, the government of Pakistan, and I mean like certain representatives of the government of Pakistan here, making very ignorant statements regarding why gender-based violence happens, or why we don't need domestic violence legislation in Pakistan, that is obviously going to have like a very sort of chilling effect on society as well, because these issues are not ultimately taken seriously. So I think that it's actually sort of like there's a two-pronged solution to this. I don't think it's an either-or situation. Was there any other questions, sorry, that you asked that I may not have addressed?
Yes, that's a more general one for all of you, that in cases of femicide, if the state takes upon the responsibility of pursuing the case, and it is the main complainant, not the family of the victim, and somehow it can abide the family from acquitting the perpetrator, wouldn't that be a more appropriate approach towards resolving the issue? Because as Dr. Imam and Ma'am Khawer quoted a few incidents where the family is actually committing the crime.
Madam, can I answer that question? Okay, thank you very much. We have a very legendary person over here, Ms. Khawa Mumtaz. She already has contributed so much in this field, and it's quite learning to listen to her whenever she speaks. I've been listening to her for over years now. Now, the question is, whenever this crime takes place, femicides, mostly done by the blood members of a society, the laws have come forward, and they have come up with a lot of sections in PPC, where now state becomes a complainant, serving as IG Sindh and IG Punjab also, whenever there was a honor killing or karokari or siyakari in that context, SHO would normally become a complainant. We have sections 310A and 311 of PPC and other sections, where state now becomes a complainant, and then also these are non-compoundable, and it moves on and it goes for the trial. The evidences are collected, but we have an answer over there. I'll just let very quickly, what Madam Khawa did mention over here, she mentioned about the overlapping law. I would just add, the understanding of the law, that's very important. You make laws, but you need to build capacity on it, translating them into regional languages, making each and everyone understand how you can actually, what are they and how are they to be implemented. And like she said, what we require at the end is a will, diligence, and dedication. That is what is required actually. You can make as many laws as you can. And then holding people accountable, holding us accountable, the law enforcement agencies or people who are actually there, that forms a very important part of it. She also talked about that the DNA and forensics costs. She's so right on that, But now what has happened is that we do get a lot of funds in the investigation heads, but the question is of expenditure. There's a bureaucratic hurdle. There is a question of capacity and capability to actually spend those amounts. And as an IG Sindh, the High Court has to actually intervene in many cases, where DNA cases were lying in many of those labs for many years and payment was not made. And we told them we have money, we want to pay, but we can't because of the bureaucratic hurdles, and then he passed a judgment, as a result of which we have to place an advance money to many of these forensics labs that, okay, they keep money for these cases, and God forbid if more cases come, you will have some earnest sort of a money over there where you can spend on that, and this I think, yeah, that, but when we are talking about the criminal justice system, we are talking about the police, we are talking about the courts, we are talking about the prisons. So we need to see what are some of the gaps over there, and what are some of the omissions, and what are some of the things which can be done. Thana kaisa hai, uske masail kya hai, thana kaisa ho sakta hai. Everybody can Google and you can find it out. The question is, do you really want to do it? The question is, the stakeholders need to ensure that these are actually the paradigm of justice, providing equity and equality and fairness. For example, in Pakistan, there are 1,917 police stations. There are about 15 police organizations in Pakistan. There are about 450,000 police officers in Pakistan who are actually trying to maintain law and order, prevent and detect crimes. Go to the court system. There are about 3,000 judges over there, and there are shortfall of almost about 25%. And the pending cases in court are almost 1.8 million. 18 lakh cases are pending over there. You can see. Go to the prisons, you will see that the capacity of 116 prisons in Pakistan is about 55,000, but almost 88,000 are staying over there. And most of the people who are in the prison lockups, 66% of them are under trial prisoners, and many of them in the prisons for the last 5 years now. So these are some of the very serious issues, which I go and highlight and try to point out that we need to redress them. We need to come up with a system where we can actually overcome them. In all these cases, femicides and all, the response is something which really matters, and the certainty law is definitely going to take us forward.
Thank you so much, Dr. Imam, for that very comprehensive answer. I think we have run over time. However, there is one question in the chat box that has been unaddressed, but any other questions that are there can be sent later and can later on be conveyed to our panelists as well. With that, I'd like to close this webinar. Thank you all so much for coming. This was a very insightful, helpful debate, and I'm sure the policy recommendations that we draw from here will be of much use and will be sent to the relevant departments. Thank you all so much for attending, and thank you all for our esteemed panel for their valuable insights in this very important subject matter.
Thank you. Thank you. This was very informative also, and updated by Mr. Khalil, because a number of things are happening as we move, but we need to now see results, and then we'll feel happier. And one last word I would say is that because there is a change taking place, women are raising their voice, they're creating space for their voice, and therefore the backlash is also terrible. So I think this is a transition phase for our society, and we have to be at it. We have to keep our pursuit and hopefully find the light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you everybody. Thank you, Abid. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Madhu. Program well conducted. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Khawar. Thank you, Zoya. Thank you, Abid and Aisha, for the questions. God bless you all.
Thank you. Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you.
Khuda Hafiz.